The effectiveness of foreign aid has been a hotly contested topic for years. Some believe that aid is essential in helping poor countries develop, while others believe that it does more harm than good. There is no easy answer, but the following discussion will explore some of the main arguments for and against aid in Africa. The Futuristic Africa Talk. Brought to you by Ovid Capita. Conversations that will shape the future of Africa.
The African consumer is not who we're being told they are. They're complex, they're multidimensional, they're dynamic.
So people look around the world and they say, where is it that we have a consumer base of that sort of size, a young consumer base that's also really
Davos, I think there's a wide acknowledgement that Africa is rising. I think we're the optimistic first of the earth, really, because at the same time,
Africa doesn't need aid, but Africa needs a lot of inflow of capital from other areas of the world.
Better Africa means better global.
Àdúgbò alárugẹ ká tún ṣe tó máa dàbí ibi tí àwọn ìgbé wa ń gba ìsinmi tí àwọn ibi ń pè ní tourism.
There remains an observation that the perceived risks of investing in Africa is much higher than the actual risk.
It is my hope that our aspiration will come to fruition.
Hello, Mr. Rick.
Hello, what's your name?
My name is Eric, Mr. Rick.
Eric, that's easy.
Yes, that's easy. How do you do?
I'm fine. How do you do today?
I'm well, thank you very much. And how is the Netherlands?
The Netherlands is sunny today, and this is very awkward because it's nearly November, and we at these times are used to skate on the ice. But today it's more than 20 degrees Celsius, so it's quite strange, but it's okay.
Okay, that's good. And it's finally good to meet you. Janice told me, and I believe that this is the first time that we are seeing in person. I am so excited that you're doing this with us. Thank you very much.
Well, Janice did a very well job in the preparation and to explain what you guys are doing with the futuristic African talk, and I like it. So it's very decent and it's very, very professional.
Thank you very much. We all at Ovid Capital, we appreciate you, and we know that with your wealth of experience, especially when it has to do with the African continent, there's so much that we really, really want to learn from you. Not just me as a person, as Eric, but also the millions of Africans that will be watching this afterwards. So we are very, very honored to have Mr. Rick join us on this podcast this hour.
Eric, you're welcome, of course, but I have to say, every day I learn as well from the African people. Because there's not one Africa, and every country has its own habits and culture, and we need, as European guys with a color, I have to say, we have to learn from them as well. It's a two-way.
True, very true. All right, I wouldn't want to take much of your time, so we'll just dive into the real reason why we are here on this podcast this hour. Now, I remember one of the emails you talked about some of the issues, especially when it has to do with aid, foreign financial aid for Africa, how some of these governments, private organizations, capitalists, they tend to divert these foreign aid now in a way where they consume it by themselves and leaving the people high and dry. So that has been a situation that we as Africans, we have been grappling with. And I think it is time that we put it to a rest. Now, my first questions, but first, tell us about Mr. Rick. Who is Mr. Rick? Where is Mr. Rick from? So the people, they want to meet you, they want to be excited. They want to meet you. Who is Mr. Rick?
First of all, I need to explain more about myself because, as you can see, I'm not a typical Dutch guy. I'm a product of the colonial background of Europe. I'm a mixture of Portuguese, German, Dutch, and Indonesian. So it means that it also that it gives you some idea about my motivation to help a continent, or African countries, who has suffered from the colonial history. That is something what is direct touching my own legacy. As such, I'm very sensitive about ethical behavior and ethical the way you look at things in this world. And I can see a lot of parallels with my background, the decolonization of Indonesia, and also the attitude of the Western world in itself. And we are still suffering today. True. And that is a very tricky pronunciation, because I understand this is very political, of course, but at the same time, we cannot deny it. True. Okay. So this is one of the motivations why I do my job. And my job is I'm a chairman of the board from Betonic Factories. And Betonic Factories is a Dutch company. And we are building precast factories and create turnkey delivery of affordable mass housing. And you couldn't do that in different ways, but we will we try to do it in a one-stop shop. If you can understand this. My position is that I have to deal with governments in the public affairs situation, with local authorities. I'm managing the local joint ventures, especially when we're dealing with public-private partnerships. And there you are. Then we have to deal with the government as well. We are dealing with I'm dealing with strategic partners like the banks, suppliers, investors, and our goal is to create sustainable improvement of the markets we are in, of the countries we are, or the cities we are working with. Okay. And that's very ambitious, I have to say, because at the same time, our ambition creates a lot of demands. Not only from our side, not only from the side of Europe or Western Europe, especially financial institutions, but as well to the African people we are working with.
That's all right. Wow, that's amazing, Mr. Rick. Now, I want to understand something, because for all of the things that you do, Africa, you hold Africa very, very dear at heart. Am I right?
Yes, yes.
Now, let us talk about this foreign financial aid. We have them constantly, they are coming in, but not everybody who these aids are meant for, they feel the effect. Some of them, they are being left out. But my first question is this: what is financial aid? Let us begin with that. What is financial aid?
As far as I can see in my experience, the financial aid we are dealing with are development money of governments of the Western world towards the African countries. And that's a very nice thing to do, because I think they have a certain obligation to do so. And you can discuss about their motivations, but in the end, I have to be very clear that development money of the Western world means most of the times also a dependency to those countries in disguise. Because in the end, it's about money, It's about creating market and creating economy as well. Also for the countries who are giving the money to Africa. So you need to be very, very reluctant about about what is the meaning of development money. And of course, next to that, development financial aid is also done by the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and that's okay as well. But for me, that these things are financial aid, and I'm not talking about venture capitalists, because that's not financial aid. That is investment with a certain purpose.
Okay. Now, you mentioned IMF. Do you think, to a reasonable extent, the IMF, which happens to be a world body responsible for financial aid, especially to most part of the Saharan part of Africa, do you think that they have done a lot or enough to curb some of these lapses that we as Africans we see not being able to have the effect that we are supposed to have in Africa? Do you think that they have done enough to curb all of that?
Well, I cannot. It's not fair for me to judge about their activities. But as far as I can see, is that they are trying.
Okay.
And it is very complex. So they have to deal with a lot of stakeholders and a lot of parties who are influencing specific situations in Africa as well. So it's not fair to focus on IMF only. But I believe that they have a very sincere purpose.
Oh, that's right. Then my next question, Mr. Rick, what are the benefits of these financial aids in Africa? What does it how is it helping the African people, especially the common African?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because first of all, we need to understand that Africa is emerging, is developing as well, and there's a lot of differences within Africa, because Africa is, 54, 58 countries, so there's not one Africa, So I think that financial aid is very important to help Africa to find its way, to create opportunities to help them with their social economic questions at one side, and at the other side, also to help them with their environmental disasters like dryness, food issues, flooding, humanitarian topics, etc. And that has everything to do with the state, the phase of development they are in. It's very easy. I learned that it is very easy for Western world to talk about democracy, to talk about self-actualization, about esteem, but you have to realize that it depends on where you are today. If your physiological needs in the basic is not organized, it is the highest priority, and financial aid can help you with that. But it's spending. It's consuming. It is. And that is needed to stay alive, if I may say so. It's one of the preconditions to come to the next step. Let's say that African countries are in that phase already, but within the country there are differences as well. You have the city, you have the remote areas, and Africa is very big. So it's not always the same in the same country as well. So there are different dynamics and different views where we are today. And you have to take that into account. So this will ask a lot of management about financial aid, where to spend, where not to spend, and where to invest and where not to invest.
Okay, now let me take you back just a little bit. Now you made the mention of where to spend, because it's very obvious that some African countries are more wealthier than the others.
Yeah.
So, in your own opinion, do you think that these African countries that are less wealthy should be the areas that are most concentrated on in terms of financial aid?
Again, it's very difficult to generalize,
Okay.
and I'm not willing to do so. I'm more or less looking at a specific situation to understand what is really going on. And asking for aid is a very important step. And sometimes I have a lot of discussion with governments, especially also with Western Europe governments. They are willing to give aid, but without being aware if there is really a need for that specific aid. And there we are. If you make that mistake, you create consumption. And you're not creating value. And you're not creating awareness about what African people can do by themselves. Because I believe there's quality in Africa.
There is.
So getting aid, of receiving aid without discussing it, means that you're not taking yourself very serious by accepting it without any discussion. You need to set your preconditions to accept, and not only willing to accept with no demands. You are entitled as an African country to set demands. And that is very contradictory, because you say, yeah, but we get aid. No. Aid is not, it doesn't mean that we are selling ourselves. So the proudness I see in Africa should be used in these kind of dynamics as well.
Okay.
But that is an attitude. And in my opinion, that is the step to professionalism. Also to stretch the countries who are willing to give aid. And it's a very nice gesture. Okay, let's talk about it.
Okay, I'm beginning to see the patterns here, because over time we've had debates, from professionals where they talk about these foreign aids, how it has become a challenge for the African people. People think that over-dependence on these foreign financial aids, it is not what the African people need. Because we as Africans, Mr. Rick, if you would agree with me, we have so much of these resources, to make Africa the African of our dreams. So when these foreign financial aids begin to come in, so we see people like the government, it is my own view, making this thing as their personal business. So you, Mr. Rick, but why is it not effective in Africa? Permit me to generalize these foreign aids. Why is it not still effective in Africa?
Again, I can see sometimes that there are cases that it is very effective, especially when we talk about sudden and unexpected disasters, because you need money to help people, to give them food, etc. It's very effective. It's very complex as well, but it is effective to a certain level. But when you want to enter the next level, the next step, then you are asking not only for the institution you are giving aid, but also for the people to make the next move. And in my book, I talk about commitment. In my book, I talk about the sense of urgency based on not only on my personal interest, but based on what is needed for my people, for my neighborhood, perhaps, for my family. So you need to be secured in the basic needs before you can enter the next step. But sometimes I have the idea that it is very difficult to create sustainable aid about my basic needs. Because if my basic needs are not grounded, are not settled, I cannot think about tomorrow.
So what are the basic needs, Mr. Rick? What are the basic needs, if you may pick some of them?
Air, water, food, shelter, sleep, safety, clothing.
All right.
Safe reproduction. I read an article about toilets, for example.
Okay.
And I read also the misconduct of local people about those toilets, because it is used as a mean to abuse females, or to create a certain violence or a power position to conquer those toilets, and then to sell it and to create pressure. You know, it's an attitude.
Oh.
And I fully understand, because it's easy money. But that's not the money we are trying to, that's not the way it should. And it's easy to talk about it. Huh? It's easy to talk about, but it's very difficult to solve, because everybody has the right to take care about himself. But now in a more community sense. And that is asking for a very good basic for basic situation in your need. It's almost the basic, the lowest level of the Maslow pyramid. You need to be sure that you are safe.
That's right. Now, I'm still going to take a bit of your words about the solutions, okay, just in a few minutes. Now, moving on. Now, we are discussing about growth and development in Africa. And to further buttress everything that you have said, this is my question. Now, to bring about this growth that we all as Africans and every other part of the world we are clamoring for, should the African government reduce aid dependency? If yes, why?
Well, it's not about rejecting financial aid. It's about embracing financial aid as well, but it has to do with the way we are dealing with this. In my opinion, reducing dependency is one of the main topics for using the financial aid. And if I look at maybe it's quite political now. If I look at the Chinese formula, they are creating dependency. At one hand, by creating help or sending in financial aid or investments in their infrastructure, for example. But at the same time, they create a dependency with the specific country. A dependency on Chinese people, and that starts with a very well thought intention, but in the end, it's about economic dependency. Okay. So I think it can be very, it should be embraced, and reducing dependency is one of the goals. But then you have to invest and not to consume.
Oh, that's a good one. That is a very good one. And I believe that as the millions of Africa that will be watching this, after this podcast, I believe there's a lot already to take home, not to reduce it, but also even the little that's coming, should be invested properly so that it can also affect the common African man. Now, we're going further. Now, you talked about institutional change by, by countries consuming these financial aids. Now, what better way should governments, the local ventures, the capitalists, the local, what better way should they leverage on these foreign financial aids to better society? Because that is all we really want to hear.
Yeah, first of all, during my traveling and during my experience from very senior people I met who has their heart on the right place, is that they told me, Rick, if you want to invest in Africa, you need to find a local investor. Why? Because they understand the market, they understand the culture, they understand what is really needed. But you should also look for a local investor with the right vision. And it means that if you find them, you are able to create commitment. Because there is already an emotional commitment, but now we need commitment by not by receiving investments from the Western world as such, but willing to invest by those local investors as well. For example, when we do a project of, let's say, $30 million, we ask 15% of our local partner, 15%, 15% of our local partners to invest. And we will make sure that 85% will be followed in that order. And what is the response we got? No. Please send us the 85% and we will make sure that the other 15% will be there. It will not work. Because they are consuming. And that is very demanding from our side. But at the same time, if we reward taking the risk locally with 85%, we have full commitment, not only from them, but also from us as well. But to get there, it's very difficult. Because I meet a lot of very strong, capital strong local investors. And still they are reluctant to do so. That's attitude.
Okay.
And let's say the 85% are investors from other countries, especially Western world investors. Why? There is also experience that the other way is not working. But then again, you can only ask it from people if they are answered in their basic needs. I hope you can follow me a bit here.
Yes, keenly. Good. Now, other than foreign aids, what would you say can Africa improve its economy? I know we're trying, okay, I know we are on the path to becoming a center for growth and investment, because over the years we've embraced so much of these startups. Let's take, for example, Egypt. We have Nigeria, we have Kenya. There's so much innovations right now coming from these locations, and so many funds are coming. Now, outside of these foreign financial aids, how else can the African government improve on its economy, in your own opinion, Mr. Rick?
Well, when we talk about a private-public partnership, it means that we are not willing to give money. It means that we are willing to talk about investment. But then again, the government should also create the same attitude, that they are willing to invest instead of willing to consume. And that is very tricky, because in Africa, there's a formal economy and an informal economy, and you are balancing it. You cannot deny the informal economy because it's there. The investors of the Western world, in my opinion, makes the mistake that they only think in the formal way. And in my experience, the formal economy in Africa is not in balance with the informal economy. So you will always be confronted with the dynamics of the informal economy, what is colliding with the formal economy of the Western world. In concrete, to make it more tangible, when I talk with banks and the global banking authority, they are following the formal economy. They are following contracts. They are following procedures, rules and regulations. And that's okay when we deal with the formal economy. But what if the economy of a country is more than 70% informal? So there are different languages. So there is a lot of dynamics what you cannot control from a formal view. What the Western world is doing, and that is not fair. But at the same time, when I talk about local investors who are putting a box of money on the table, and I accept it, I am responsible for the source of that money.
True.
So I have to be sure that this money is legal. But legal in what sense? In the formal economy.
Oh, the informal.
So you understand the difficulty. When I try to do business with, let's say, a country like Burundi, they are emerging. They are working very hard, like Rwanda. They are working very hard. Rwanda has to deal with a prejudice about the state of government, etc., and Western world is blocking them. The same for Burundi. But they are dealing with a development towards a more modern society. And what the Western world has built up in 200-300 years, they expect from African countries to do it in 10 years. It's not possible.
Thank you.
Can you follow me?
Yes.
In this. And so it's stretching the government as well in Africa. Because my experience is that we had a deal with a country like Burundi, for example. And then we entered the formal global bank authorities. And they have the right, they don't have the right ranking. And it stopped. So we cannot invest. And that is very, very sad. So it's not only the government of Africa, it's the global dynamics as well. And the formal and the tension between the formal economy and the informal economy. And it hurts, it hurts.
It does. It does.
And that is true dependency, no? I cannot change it. But I'm suffering because I can see the sincerity of some governments who wants to make a change to their people. And so I've got 5-6 experience with countries in Africa, and it's so sad, but it's reality.
Mr. Rick, so now over the years you have worked especially in Africa, and from everything that you have said, you know, I can basically speak into your heart for Africa, simply put. Now, for countries in Africa that are below that standard, or whom the Western world think that they are below that standard, what is your opinion? What can they do better to up their standard so that they don't get to miss out, when these big investments, when they come on their table?
Well, in my opinion, when you look at Africa, the strongest shoulder will take the biggest load. And in Africa, there are people with very strong shoulders. And I'm not talking only about governments, but I'm also talking about industries as well. The struggle is sometimes not with the foreign countries. The struggle is sometimes within. And that's also a legacy of the colonialism. So you need a certain visionary who, like Mr. Nkuvo from Ghana. I like this guy very much in his way of thinking. But at the same time, you can see his struggle because it's so difficult to create an opening somewhere and to make a start. But it's the best thing you can do, create a start somewhere. And that's nice about our business. Our business is about mass housing. And we have to deal with discussions about informal settlements, they call it, the SLOPs, informal settlement. They have a nice word for it. And it has to do with the unaffordability of the real estate, what is already there. The question is why? Why is it so out of reach for the common people? We encountered during our affordability, let's make things more clear. If we talk about affordable housing, we talk about apartments, what will be produced at a low cost price because of the mass. And it's about $23,000. So it's quite affordable. What is happening in the market? The turnover of in-between parties create money, and suddenly the affordable producing of our apartments is being sold for 4 times, 5 times the price, and it will not be affordable anymore. So what we are trying to do is to grab the total chain together with government. But of course, we have to deal with traditional people and traditional construction companies who are not willing to change and work together with us. Because we bring in new technology, we're creating jobs, we are creating vocational schools to create development with people, to make sure that the physiological need in the basic area, like safety, like creating a home, like being independent in their building up their lives, and make them ready to have some dreams. But then you have to be very close with government, and you have to understand, and then the traditional economy have to understand that in our opinion, it's the only way to make a change without disturbing. It's just different. Give us a break. So the opportunities are there, but the threat is in itself. And that's our struggle. And it's very rewarding to talk about it with ambassadors, with government, with ministries. They all embrace the idea, but it's very difficult to make it happen.
And why is that, Mr. Rick? It's complicated.
It's complicated, but it has, in my opinion, it has to do with the lack of vision. It's the short-term goals. And I fully understand that the short-term goals in Africa is much more important than the long-term goals. Because there are a lot of African people out studying in foreign countries, and there's a lot of intellect as well. And some of them are returning to Africa and do have these struggles. The long vision they have, the purpose to help their own country by coming back, are sometimes killed by the locals who are not looking further away than next day. And that's a pity. So you have to find those smart people to bring them together and create a best practice. And that's what we are doing today in Nigeria, in Lagos. And it's a very difficult process, but it's so rewarding. And we see growing enthusiasm and people meeting each other at the right frequency, you know, at the right level. And it's so motivating to do so. It doesn't mean that it's easy, because in the end we have to deal with who is the owner of the ground. Well, it's very difficult in Africa, you know.
It is.
But at least there is willingness, because we understand, okay, this is our bigger purpose. Let's do this. And I believe that if we are successful in Nigeria, Lagos, it will make a huge turn in the approach of people. And it will touch a lot of other countries in Africa as well.
Awesome.
That's my main motivation to do this. And sometimes I get feedback from ministries or from ambassadors, and some are saying, and some are part of the United Nations, and they told me, Rick, I have prayed for many, many years to meet people like you. And it's so rewarding to get these kind of compliments. But in the end, it has to do with, okay, let's make it happen then.
Results.
Yes. So it's not only the government, but the government should be brave to push the traditional way of thinking and create the long-term vision, and to be loyal to that together, despite the different conflicts internally, despite the different interests. It's about our people, you know. Let's create a nice basis to create the next level, to create our own prosperity.
Okay.
And I cannot say it differently.
Okay, Mr. Ray, somewhere there I felt a bit of emotions, because I can see how you want to see the African people lead a better life. Now, you talked about the government, not thinking long term, but could it also be, this is just me thinking, could it also be that the people, because the government is responsible for a set of people. Now, because when a government assumes leadership, there are certain things that are required of that government. So in your opinion, do you think that the people whom the government is responsible for could be some of these challenges that they face, not thinking long term, but looking for a shorter way or to please the people who elected them into office.
Yeah, of course, I fully understand that my point of view has to do with the holistic picture. The thing is that you should translate it back into more tangible daily projects, for example. So you have to make it more small, and but you have to do it. You have to make it to make it clear. And again, there are also a lot of people in my position who are behaving, who have shown misconduct in their way of doing business, and those experiences are there as well. And I'm fully aware about it, because sometimes we have to defend ourselves and to answer questions what is caused by people like me who has shown misconduct. And that is, and the government is right to be very reluctant and critical to that, because when we listen to their experience, it's not us, but we cannot be responsible for the other. But in the end, it's feeding our attitude. It's feeding our prejudice as well. It's almost the same struggle we have with the Western world to make them clear that Africa is not one country, and that there is not only war and conflicts, but there are also a large group of people who are willing to make something better. But sometimes it's all in how you picture it and how you are influenced by the media or etc. etc. It's prejudice. It's naive to think that Africa doesn't have a future. There is a lot of future, but people didn't even took the effort to visit Africa. What are you talking about? So I don't know if this is an answer to your question, but my main purpose is to make things small and create little steps, but tangible little steps.
Tangible little steps. I think that is a takeaway for me and for many others right now. I mentioned that that I was going to take you back just a little bit, based on a particular statement you made about the solutions. Now let us visit the solutions, because right now we are trying to see how we can better our society, not as Nigerians, not as South Africans or Namibians or Burundi, but as Africa as a whole. So right now, the main discourse is about growth and investment, because not so many persons are enlightened. They don't have this information about what investment really is, because all they think about is, okay, we are going to get this foreign financial aid, to take care of our schools, our hospitals, our housing problems, our dilapidated roads, and all of that. Now, the African man, because I've met quite of them, they don't really believe anything when it comes to investment. So, and I ask myself, what could be the problem? Is it that we're not taught about what investment is, or we don't really know what growth is? Mr. Rick, please kindly help me with that.
In my opinion, it has all to do with how Africa is influenced by the Western world in the face of decolonization. They created a certain tension in your society, what is creating conflict in itself. the Western world creates a picture that you can only be successful if you do the same thing as they do, or they have done. But that's not true. As long as Africa is not embracing their own culture, business culture, and is willing to follow their own values, the moment you try to be the Western world, you're creating your own problem because you step into a trap. And the trap is the financial system. So for me, the key is understand the global dynamics, but act local. And try sorry?
Not many people, not many Africans, would understand that, think global, but act local. Please, I think I would really want to touch a bit on that.
Okay, you have to understand where you come from. You have to understand what the threats are and how it is conflicting with the values you're coming from. The moment you play a game what's not your game, you will lose. But at the same time, I fully understand in the global view that African countries are dependent. During the years, they have been made dependent on the financial system of the Western world. Look at the debts of countries, and you have to pay huge interest for that. So, look at the history, the supply, we call it in the minerals of Africa. Were sold in a very cheap price to the Western world. The Western world is building products from it, and they sell it at the highest price to Africa back. So Africa is cheated 2 times.
But whose fault is that, Mr. Rick? Whose fault is that?
In my opinion, it's the aggression of the Western world. But it's not a fault. It's the lack of sincerity. It's the, and now I'm very political.
From the African people or from the Western world, lack of sincerity?
From the Western world, and they misuse, in my opinion, the richness of other countries, in this particular case, Africa. And they created a formal system, a formal economy, what was not yours. So they play a game with African in the early centuries, or in the past centuries, to give you to give Africa some rules, and they didn't see the impact of accepting those rules, economical rules. And there you are. You're not 1-0 behind, you're 5-0, maybe 10-0 behind. And they created debt. And as long as Africa has debts, they are dependent on the Western world, and that is, in my opinion, a discussion worth to have that discussion. But you cannot change the world anymore. It is as it is. But you can change. You can be hurt, but you can prevent to sell your soul. But that is very difficult. So you have to play the game to understand the game. And the moment you understand the game, in my opinion, but it is very philosophical, of course.
It's okay.
The moment you understand the game, you understand as well where the bottlenecks are and where you should say no to certain dynamics. Well, we are very philosophical here. Okay.
Yes, yes, just a bit, just a bit, because now there are situations where these Western authorities, they come. Let's use Congo as an example, the DRC, where the major mineral for the manufacture of the mobile device that we use today, yeah, it's gotten from where they get them at very cheap prices.
Yeah.
Then they sell them back to us, as you have said, in exorbitant prices. And we all agree that this is not a fair thing. But over the years, my opinion that we have come, that we are very learned people, we are very hardworking people as Africans. And we, as the ordinary Africans, in general, want to see some of these things change, because this thing just happened to a very few people, amassing this wealth for themselves. Why the ordinary African man is in a rural area, just wasting away. Now, I'm saying this to make a point from what you said, that the African people, or should I say the representatives, should be able to say no to some of these dynamics. But why are they not doing that? Because we still feel the pressure, Mr. Eric, that some of them, they are not doing that. It is corruption, for self-glorification, what could be the problem?
It's not easy to talk about solution. It's easy to talk about certain causes, the root cause of this. When you look at Africa, if you look at the borderlines, it's not fair. Every borderline has a conflict in itself with the local people. So, as far as I know, it's very difficult for African countries to create a certain one-face nationality. And saying this means that our internal, a lot of different interests or different dynamics, but has also to do with power, perhaps, with attitude towards each other, with the negative side of diversity. We and us, or you and me. We are from a different group or a different subculture, even if we are Kenyans or Ugandese or Burundi. Look at Burundi, their history. It is created, but it is also created by history. It's not fair, it's not fair. So the internal conflicts is also something your government needs to manage, and that is very difficult. And I'm talking about different tribes, but I'm also talking about different religions, etc., etc. It's not easy. So you always have to find a compromise somewhere. And sometimes a compromise means that you cannot get the next step. You cannot find the next step because we are not ready yet. And that is also your legacy, and it's also the product of the colonialism of the Western world. And there is my anger, if I may say so.
Right, it's fine. All right, now just to conclude, I know you have a lot, so many things to do after now, so I wouldn't want to take extra of your time. But just to round things off, talking about growth and investment in Africa. Do you think Africa has done a lot? In your own thoughts, have we done reasonably well?
Yeah, when I look at for example, the forest industry, I think Africa is doing a very good job. together with the Western world as well. And it has also to do with a certain attitude in that area, the forest industries, looking at nature, a certain sustainability, what they're looking for. And there are a lot of people who are embracing the global purpose of it. I can see nice examples that it is really happening and it's really working, and that it is also sharing the benefits of it. But it's not in every area, you know. And that's a pity. So it all has to do with finding each other in the same purpose. And it has nothing to do with nations or with cultures. It has to do with embracing the common goals we have. And I think when we talk about investment, create a very good common goal, but don't make it too big. Create small projects in which you can show best practices, and you can create a nice fundament for the next step.
Awesome.
And that is what I believe in. And that's what I like about affordable mass housing, because we can reach a lot of people by creating jobs, bringing in technology, creating vocational schools, creating microfinancing, just to let the money there where it is. And at the same time, I make, because we are the company, we still make some profit, but we don't go for the maximum profit, you know. It's not our purpose. We have to live. We live in a Western country, so we have to make a profit. Otherwise, we cannot do this. But at the same time, nobody tells us how much that profit must be, and certainly not our stockholders who tells me not to go for the maximum. No, go for the sustainability, and it will be rewarded. And I meet very nice people.
Awesome. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. So we take it that African has been your second home.
Well, it has a huge space in my heart already. Because Africa is such a big continent with such with such a lot of diversity in it, with such nice cultures, nice people, and you should be proud. Africa should be proud about themselves, and I see people who are very proud about themselves. And on global view, I see a lot of people who has a prejudice about Africa, but they don't know Africa. They have a picture about Africa what is not reality, you know, but they are on certain key positions, and that is devastating, you know. Those people should not be there, but they are there, and they think they're right, and that's a pity. But that is the thing, eh? If you work internationally, if you meet people, if you understand the locals, if you understand the dynamics, if you understand history, you can see the good things. But it needs investment in time. It needs a specific interest in your view. You need to do something for it. It's not easy. It is not easy money, you know. It's about people. And I'm very privileged. I'm privileged, despite the fact that my parents flee Indonesian because they are part Dutch. They flee Indonesian, and we came in the early 60s to the Netherlands, and we were not welcome here. Despite that, I'm very privileged because my parents sacrificed themselves to create my path. They created my fundament to make sure that I can make the next step. And that is our purpose. That's what I do with my kids as well. I hope they can make the third or the fourth step, because I am fighting for them to create a better fundament sometimes in a hostile system. But it is as it is. I need to survive. And I can afford myself to be patient. And that's not always the case in Africa. So I am privileged. And it's easy talking.
All right, Mr. Rick, thank you so much. Mr. Rick, trust me, there's a lot for us to still talk about. No, because if we have the whole day, probably might not be enough, because really, I have got to learn a lot, and there's so many people are going to also learn a lot from this podcast when we put it out there on the public space. And I believe that when we call upon you very soonest, you will still oblige us, right?
Of course.
So thank you very much for your time. So everybody, Africa, this is Mr. Rick, and he has been amazing sharing his wealth of experience, in the area of growth and development in Africa, touching on foreign financial aids and how we can, as a people, as Africans, embrace investment, thinking long-term, and actually working with government and what authorities to make this work as a people. So, Mr. Rick, we are so grateful. We at Obid Capital, we are very grateful, and we shall. I believe that we shall be seeing you soon. We shall be seeing you soon.
I hope so, and I would like to thank you for this opportunity to that I may share my thoughts, but at the same time, I need to be very humble because it's more complex than we can imagine.
It is. I couldn't agree with you more. So thank you very much, because right now I have to let you go, and I think we will talk off record, probably before the end of today.
Thank you very much, Eric, and I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Have a great day, Mr. Rick. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The information on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not investment or financial advice. Please do your own research before making any investment decisions. None of the information on this podcast constitutes or should be relied on as a suggestion, offer, or other solicitation to engage in or refrain from engaging in any purchase, sale, or any other investment-related activity with respect to any STO or other transaction.